How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. As always, I'm your host, Hicksydust, here with some more Pokemon-related content, as promised in last week's video. Alright, so I'm not going to bore you guys with the full history. Pokemon's origins are well documented up until this point. But in the United States, it all started back in 1998 with Pokemon Red and Blue. Specifically for me, I was gifted Pokemon Blue when I was about 8, and little did I know that that little cartridge would launch me into what would become one of Nintendo's most famous series of all time. Since then, I've played pretty much every mainline game with a few gaps here or there when I didn't have the right console, but most of those games were on the Nintendo GameCube and were considered spin-offs like Gale of Darkness. But for this video, we're going to be focusing on Gen 1 itself, what those games meant to me, some of my favorite and least favorite Pokemon from this gen, and the teams I still find myself going back to today. As a disclaimer, I'll be using images from Pokemon Home to illustrate my talking points. When you are greeted by Professor Oak, he presents you with 3 Pokemon as options for your starter: Charmander, Squirtle, and Bulbasaur. My choice has always been Bulbasaur. To me, it just handles the early game so well, having type advantages over the first 2 gyms like Rock and Water. And then the game itself allows you the option to compensate for its weaknesses by catching Pokemon down the line. The most recent iterations of my team include Pokemon such as Venusaur, Arcanine, Jolteon, Marowak, Kingler, and Fearow. Though in previous runs I've also been known to get him a champ if I could find a trading partner, and I've also thrown Muck in there from time to time. Muck's Minimize plus Toxic combo can help tank your way through battles, but while effective, it can make battles feel clanky and stalled out, so depending on what I'm going for, it doesn't always make the cut. Now when it comes to Arcanine, though being a Pokemon Red exclusive, I always try to find a way to put him in my playthroughs, whether it be just playing Red or trade him into my Blue saves. To me, he's just one of the more striking and one of the cooler options aesthetically that we have compared to some of the other Fire-type Pokemon from Gen 1. You can catch him relatively early before you face Erica, Gen 1's Grass-type gym leader, and hold him for the rest of your playthrough. Before I forget to mention this, you have to evolve him by catching a Growlithe and then using a Firestone to turn him into an Arcanine. Jolteon's origin story for my team follows a similar pattern to Arcanine. Of all the 3 evolutions that you can get in Gen 1, Jolteon to me just has always been one of the coolest. And then later, figuring out that Thunder and Thunderbolt are really good counters for Lance's endgame dragons in the Elite Four just makes it fit on my team that much better. Now Marowak just happens to be an evolution of one of my favorite Pokemon to come out of Gen 1, and that's Cubone. Cubone is one of the Pokemon in Gen 1 that actually has its own mini storyline. In the Lavender Town graveyard, you are besieged by unknown ghosts. Get the Sylph Scope, and you can identify them. Right at the top of the tower, the lead ghost appears to be a Marowak who died fighting Team Rocket protecting its young. Cubone are adorable little Pokemon who wear the dead skull of its mother, and while this sounds like something Disney would try and pull off, it creates a very unique silhouette. It's widely debated by fans what Pokemon actually hides under that skull, with some pointing out similarities to Charmander and others to baby Kangaskhan. Either way, I love this little guy. If we didn't have to evolve it into Marowak, I probably wouldn't, but to get the most out of your Pokemon, it's best to let them obtain their final forms. Quick side note, you'll probably see a theme in these videos when I talk about my favorite Pokemon. Throughout the gens, they tend to go from little adorable Pokemon,
It's just a baby,
all the way into absolute units.
This is my favorite level. I call it Super Saiyan 3. Sorry to keep you waiting, it takes a while to get to.
He's also a ground type, which is great for countering Koga's poison types. Now when it comes to Kingler, again, Kingler just happens to be my favorite water type Pokemon in all of Gen 1. They took a crab, gave it a giant claw, and some crown spikes, and that was enough for me to subscribe to this one for life. In Gen 1, you typically need a water type Pokemon to help you traverse the whole map, after obtaining the Surfeit gem. And Kingler just usually fulfills that role for me. You can teach it Guillotine, which is a one-hit KO move. I typically avoid moves like these because they have very low success rates, and often leave you completely wide open. Lastly, this just leaves Fearow to talk about. When rounding out your team, you want to consider the late game or the end game. Fearow itself evolves from Spearow, an easy enough Pokemon to find in the early game, which you can grab and train up with you throughout the game. He'll mostly be useful when fighting Bruno. Bruno carries with him a mix of rock and fighting types. We can leave the rock types to either Venusaur or Kingler to handle at this point, but a flying or psychic type Pokemon works best against Bruno's fighters. I just prefer Spearow to Pokemon such as Pidgey or Dodrio, which is how Fearow ends up in my team. Alright, so before we get into the least favorite Pokemon of all time, it's time for me to bring up an honorable mention. I'm just going to be talking about Arbok for a little bit. Arbok itself is a poison-type Cobra-type Pokemon. The image you're seeing above is from my Pokemon Go account, just a walking buddy action shot. For me, as a reptile enthusiast, it's always pretty cool to take something you love in the real world and throw it onto your teams, and a giant cobra just kind of hits that aesthetic for me. Something I try to use from time to time and try to see if I can fit him into my teams. So now that we've talked about some of my favorite Pokemon from Gen 1, it's time to talk about one of my least favorite that came out of Gen 1. That Pokemon for me has always been Mr. Mime. I've never really liked this thing. Never found a real use for it on my team, and it's not something I went out of my way to go hunt down. It's just this weird one-off. On top of that, it never really read as a Pokemon to me, especially in the anime. It reads more like creepy uncle with some of the interactions with Ash's mom. Gen 1 is a classic, and I love it. But Mr. Mime is one design that I wish they had kind of left on the cutting room floor and maybe made space for one of the other cut Pokemon to come in and take its place. But we can't exactly rewrite the past, so now we're stuck with it. So there you guys have it. My little love letter and side eye to the first generation. Gen 1 in a nutshell through my eyes. Gen 1 Pokemon opened the door to what is now a beloved franchise for so many people. From folks my age who grew up with it, to younger players discovering their own favorites and least favorites. The game itself has that classic gameplay loop that can keep you hooked for hours. Whether you're focused on completing the Pokédex, catching Pokemon, battling trainers and gym leaders and getting through the game as quickly as possible, or shiny hunting your favorite Pokemon. This game has something for everybody to get obsessed with. And, everyone plays the game differently depending on your own style. I'll be doing more Pokemon-related content and going over the other generations down the line, talking about which one has added to the series, my own personal takes on them, and of course my favorites and criticism from each, much like you saw in this video. If you enjoyed this, drop a like and subscribe so you don't miss out on the next videos with the rest of the generations, or even just more Pokemon-related content that I have planned down the line. But for now, this is it, guys. Thank you so much for watching. My name, as always, is Hicksydust, and hopefully, we'll see you in the next one.